Hello, welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm Andy Cleff and Jay Hrcsko. It is good to see you and hear you once again.
Likewise, back in the saddle.
Been a while. We're joined today with Gene Gendel, enterprise transformation agent, coach, facilitator, mentor, lots of good things. You've dabbled in, no, more than dabbled in, product development, customer value delivery. You've flown at all the levels, from the team to middle management to strategic. How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there. It's the end of the year, end of the season. I'm a little beat, but still kicking, still alive and kicking. So I'm happy to be here. You two fine gentlemen. So that's great.
Well, now we're taking dramatic license with the term gentleman, but we'll continue.
You sure you're on the right show? So this is the first time you've been here, and we like to play a little game called Let's Find Out Something About Our Guest that's not on their LinkedIn profile. And one of our, favorite questions along these lines is, what is one of your superpowers, Gene Gendel?
One of my superpowers would be to piss off people, I guess. On a more serious note, I'm a very sarcastic and very wannabe humorous guy who tries to give a smile and make a joke into almost anything that otherwise would cause people have a cringeworthy feeling. I don't like addressing real problems with a grouchy face and with a bad facial mask. I like smiling into those problems. So to me, it's a way to kind of disarm sometimes give myself some extra confidence, so I smile into a problem. So maybe that's one of my assets. I'm not sure if it's superpower, but it's my asset. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. This is the first in what we hope to be a trilogy. We're going to figure out schedules down the road.
Yeah.
Today, we want to explore organizational enablers of agility, things like HR norms, policies, financial practices, and how they help or hurt. At another time, we'll look into product centricity, what it really means beyond just relabeling shit like titles and practices. And then the third show, we hope, will be something that wraps it all up, a conversation about org design and how crucial and critical it is for sustainable change and agility.
Great sequence to me. I like it.
So you come with quite a few decades of experience helping orgs navigate all kinds of challenges. Apparently you do it with a good blend of sarcasm, humor, and just getting people to the edge of, did he really say that?
I did.
Did I hear him right?
Yeah, I mean that's my weapon.
Well, let's dive into today's theme and let's explore things like traditional performance management, budgeting, and how these entities known as HR and finance either help or block change. So let's unpack it. So let's explore it. Jay, why don't you open us up with an initial exploration of those things.
So I'm going to go off my experience, and I'm curious to hear what both you and Gene say, but in my experience, HR and finance are typically talked of as last when it comes to when we want to make some type of organizational change. I'm going to say we want to do some purposeful evolution, right? I'm going to stay away from the change word. We want to evolve our organization to do something different. But typically it starts in IT, it starts in development. Hey, we got this new fad, this new thing, this new model we want to try. And it has been my experience that typically HR and finance are looked at as almost afterthoughts. Like, well, we can't change the financial process. Hear that argument all the time. We have FASB, we have GAAP reporting, we have these things we have to do. We can't touch that. And then HR, for whatever reason, I have my own personal reasons, which are not appropriate. I'm not going to voice them at this time, my own opinions. But we also avoid HR like it's a live landmine. And I am of the mind that when you're trying to reinvent your organization, when you're trying to evolve it, purposeful evolution, those are actually the two organizations I think you need to start with first. And here's why. I argue that how you fund your work and the way you approach allocating capacity, funds, revenue to a certain thing, if you don't change that, you're not gonna change much of anything. And the other thing is, the more I dig into when it comes to HR, the more I dig into sociology and philosophy and how people work and how people think. Andy, you did that whole thing on the 7 hints about the brain, and the triune brain doesn't exist, does it not? When you think about what motivates people, I think HR, when it comes down to positional authority, when it comes down to role title, when it comes down to incentive and compensation, I think we typically tackle those things last because we're trying to build the other pieces first. And I'm almost, in my experience, I would love the opportunity where somebody hires me and says, "Hey, or you and Gene are coming in and you want to start from a blank slate. Where would you start?" And I would look at Gene, and Gene would look at me, and I would say, which one of us gets HR, which one of us gets finance? Because I am of the mind that if we start there, I think that can act as a force multiplier to accelerate the evolution you're looking to get, but also keep some of the rough waves down. Gene, am I totally nuts or no?
You're definitely not nuts, and if you are nuts, I'm also another nut. I very much think similarly, and if you just allow me, I can peel back this layer by layer just a little more, just to I'll capitalize on what you just said, Jay. Thank you very much. So first of all, the old, I think, German proverb, right? Who pays the piper calls the tune, right?
Hmm.
Well, remember that one, right? Essentially, the person who pays for something has the power to control how it's done, which has been, sitting in my mind for years, and has been blown my mind, because if we look at most of those so-called agile transformations, so-called because lots of them are fads and fakes, they're not driven by revenue centers. They're driven by cost centers. We would be lucky if this is some sort of a well-informed CTO, CIO tower that has been pioneering good engineering practices and is trying to take business along. There could be far edge cases such as Agile PMO, so-called Agile PMO, or some other very traditional, unfit for purpose organizational structures, centers of excellence, or centers of relabeling humans into XYZ Agile roles that are given this superpower to do things that actually they're not really capable of doing well. So that's just something I wanted to say. If we want to talk about systemic organizational agility, and when I say this, I mean deep, systemic, long-lasting, continuous changes, then we need to really understand who pays for this music. We need to follow the dollar on this. That being said, of course, it brings me to, it's one of the very important organizational enablers is budget and finance, just like you said, Jay. So what do customers buy? They don't buy projects, programs, portfolios,
status reports,
Story points.
Yep.
On all other metrics, for crying out loud, all of that, second, third level of importance nonsense. They buy products, and then if they buy products, then it would make sense to think of a product being the centerpiece of budget and financing. So we should think in terms of what do clients buy, what they pay for, and if we use any of those products internal, although I would not advocate explicitly let's sell to internal people, because this is internal funny money. But internal budgets come into play. We need to follow the money. So if we follow the money, we can then change things very differently, because then we're going to be able to fund and budget long-lasting product teams. We would be able to really improve how we deliver value to end customers and measure a true return on true investment. So budgeting is one of the very important organizational enablers. And if we don't tackle it first, if we leave it until last, we're going to have lots of saga and fads like fake productization, agile theater, role relabeling, you name it. We have a whole, array of classic systemic problems we see with organizations that think that budgeting is like an untouchable area, like Al Capone's times, right? You don't go there. Sure not. And by the same token, like you said, Jay, HR, a huge can of worms, right?
Let's open it.
Yeah, let's open it. Yeah, so, I could say that for the most part, HR norms and policies that govern procurement, hiring, assessment, evaluation are like lag like 30, 40, maybe 50 years behind. And some of the things, some of the practices that HR implements today is, oh my God, I'm thinking this is one of the most wasteful cost centers that organizations have to sponsor, with exception of some of the specific roles that handle maybe benefits and and healthcare. And if we talk about procurement and onboarding arm of HR and the arm of HR that's responsible for personal development, especially with large organizations, I'm just not sure if companies spend their dollars or whatever currency they use wisely there.
I would be curious, Gene, not to interrupt you. You
Yeah,
just
please.
talked about personal development, right? Developing your talent, right? Talent development. Why would I want to go hire somebody else or go pay market value when I can retrain someone who's currently here, who's got an ancillary skill set to lead them up? I would love to sit down at like the SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, right? I'd love to get some SHRM executives in a room and ask them, when you think of the HR department, do you think it's part of your role to skill up, train up, and develop talent? Or do you really think of it as we're here to do, training, and we're here to protect the leaders of the company from themselves, right? The old joke of HR isn't there to protect you, they're there to protect the company, right? I wonder if there's maybe even a point of view, a perspective mismatch of what they think they own and what they think they shouldn't.
I don't know if it's a mismatch. I come back to what you said, Gene. It's theater. It's play acting that we do care about you, individual contributor, and we show it in the following ways, which are all bullshit. We're recording this towards the end of the year. So, hey, listeners, have you finished your annual performance review cycle? God, what a fucking waste of money that is.
It is a huge waste of money.
Money, time, stress, ulcers.
On both sides.
Yes.
The manager quote preparing it and the recipient receiving it.
Well, so let's unpack this a little more. First of all, economies of scale. Like, I hate discussing scaling because I like this scaling idea more than scaling, but this is actually true scale, amplifying the waste that one single line manager goes through at a large organization. So imagine how many managers, how many man hours are pissed away on stuff that is completely useless, completely counterintuitive, very bureaucratic. And as one of the good people said once, I won't be dropping names here, it's a legal trail for a rainy day. I think it was one of the well-respected budgeting and HR folks by name is Bjarti Bogsnes. He wrote a great book, Beyond Budgeting.
Yeah.
And that's in one of his talks, he mentioned this. And I fully agree with him on this one because the only thing they do, those first line managers, they create the case for HR that if something goes south, we have something on this individual. And if you want to take this slightly further, based on this almost useless scribble that we have now in an individual, we somehow very subjectively are going to define how much this person is worth.
Yes.
Mid-year reviews and end-year reviews where you hypothetically should be able to say back to a manager what you think, just to check the box and create an illusion that, hey, we heard you. But at the end of the day, it's really just one side speaks, the other one listens. And frankly speaking, how many employees would really go and lock horns with their managers over something that no one really believes in, really? I mean, those managers hate what they do.
I will speak of personal experience, personal recent experience. I manage less than half a dozen. Less than half a dozen, not a lot of people. We just did our whole exercise where we don't stack rank, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I went into my conversation armed for bear, to your point, Gene, right? Like, I had spreadsheets and feedback and workday responses and this and that and pages of notes of sponsors that I'd talked to and all that. And it's giant theater for me to get in and submit people where I put them, and I got a thumbs up.
Yeah.
And I'm glad. Like, I'm not complaining. I'm glad because people got where I put them where I wanted to put them. But to your point, you exponentially increased the amount of time that I spent with every other line manager. And then think about that scales upwards because it goes to Andy, who's my boss. It goes to Gene, who's his boss. Like,
And it's even worse than that because it's delayed and it's without context. And 4 out of 5 times, you cannot say, well, that is feedback we got from Gene from your meeting last week because it's depersonalized.
Yeah, it's all incognito,
It's a
right?
mess.
Gentlemen, let's add something else to it. So speaking of organizational waste, Muda, let's not forget that for every wasted hour that a manager spends on this, there is someone at HR that does the same. So you multiply everything, and that's why it's an economy of scales, right? You end up with, super linear growth in waste that's produced. For the most part, it's a sunk cost. No one really ever comes back and evaluates and reassesses how much time and money did we actually spend on the process that brought almost no value. Now, if someone says, "Oh, well, this is done for personal career development of an individual," in my experience, at least in those organizations where I coached and consulted, if you ask an average employee how much they take away from their line manager for their personal to help themselves with their own career growth, with advice, with recommendations, it's a very, very low percentage. People actually know what they want to do. People look around, snoop around, research. Maybe a very junior employee may need some hand-holding from the beginning, and they cherish and they worship their line manager. But once you have, got your feet wet for a couple of years, you pretty much know what you do. So I personally always question, why do I need a first line manager who controls almost nothing organizationally? Why do I need that person to define my career path and my journey and my destiny?
I would and that, Gene, with any manager who's worth their salary, right? They have trends. I had somebody say once, it might have been Andy Cleff quote. I have so many on this whiteboard. People start becoming leaders when they stop becoming managers.
I agree fully.
And a good leader will, I don't want to talk about your performance. I want to talk about what's going on right now. Where do you want to go? How are you trying to get there? Where can I help? Right. Those are the best as a leader. And I like to think of myself as a leader. Those are the most rewarding conversations you can have with a subordinate. It's where are you trying to go and how can I get you there? When we start talking about what did you accomplish this year? And, Q3, what was your deliverable? It's to your point, customers don't pay us for that.
They don't. We can probably beat this horse to death. Just the fact that this has been a very traditional, very legacy way to incentivize people, that's mind blowing on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It has been historically proven, scientifically, research has been done left, right, and center. This is not the best way to incentivize people when you put money on the table. You better pay them well enough so they don't think about the money. I think I'm paraphrasing Daniel Pink in his great video.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm referring to. Why do I want to think about collecting more cash if I'm already getting paid well and fairly? Let me focus on work. That's a problem on its own. Now, it becomes a double or triple oxymoron when we start incentivizing people for their individual performance, monetarily incentivizing, while expecting them to work as a part of the team where collective ownership is expected, where everyone is expected to teach from each other, teach each other, learn from each other, and fly and burn together. For bluntly speaking, Jay and Andy, why would I, being your team member, why would I try to help you to get better at what you or maybe are not so great if, and I'm sure you're probably more things that you're greater than I am, but why would I help you in any way, shape, or form if our collective, if our shared project manager or line manager says, Gene, at the end of the day, at the end of the year, actually you and Andy and Jay are in the same pack, competing with each other for a bonus of money that I have to distribute amongst the three of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would cut your throat tomorrow and you would do the same to me. And I would not be surprised if you did that. Because at the end of the day, they creating an antagonizing conditions around us, and they make us into rivals as opposed to compadres, right?
No argument that this stuff is perverse.
Good choice of words.
Yeah.
From an HR performance point of view, the annual budget cycle that's tied to a calendar that has nothing to do with market reality. What is holding this shit in place? Why is it so difficult for most organizations to move away from these 30, 40, 50, 100-year-old practices?
Jay, you want to say something?
I got two, Gene. You tell me if you agree. I think the first thing is inertia.
Yeah.
The first thing is inertia. These are, no matter how terrible they may be, these are practices that have gained steam, and we have always done it this way. That's the first thing.
Yep.
I think the first thing is inertia. I think the second thing is, and this is going to be, might surprise people where I go with this shot, companies that don't know what that do know what they don't know will go out and hire a consultant to help them. So I know I don't know this. If you have consultants that are pulling from the same inertial body of knowledge, your Big Four, your KPMG, your PwC, your Deloitte, your Accenture, they're going to show up and tell you to do what everybody else is doing because they see what everybody else is doing. Whereas true transformation, true transcendence comes from breaking the mold. That's I think it's inertia, and I think it's the safe advice is what we've always done. What do you think, Gene?
So Jay, first of all, I'm not sure if Andy would have to cut out the names that you just dropped from the speech.
We'll just repeat them.
Your Big Four, your KPMG, your PwC, your Deloitte, your Accenture.
I would double, triple, quadruple sign off on everything you said. And before I get to the point, I will make a preview. It is obnoxious and irresponsible and grotesque today for any company to still rely on decision-making of a large consultancy of an XYZ naming convention name, because they are there to milk them, to bastardize their P&L, to walk away with a lot of pocket cash and deliver most likely very, very little value. So if a company really wants to rely on a consultant, they should really cherry pick someone from the industry, do enough due diligence.
Yeah.
Pay for research on who they are bringing in, but bring a 1, 2, 3 small, lean and mean experts in the field, maybe a tiny boutique firm, but do not bring those conglomerates. Don't bring those monoliths and behemoths.
Because they're bringing that giant body of knowledge that they've established over decades of work. So I'll put this in a real life context. So we're currently in my organization, we're looking at run, grow, and transform funding, right? So how much of our budget goes to those buckets?
Yeah.
And backed up on the back of that, somebody found the report from Gartner, which talks about X industry, Y% is spent on all these three. And if we go to any consultant and say, hey, we're in the automotive industry, and typically you spend this percent on run, this percent on grow, this percent on transform. And if you ask them, is this right? They're going to tell you, yes, that's right, because that's what everybody else does. And my pointed question back up the totem pole, which I don't know how well it was received, was, okay, in our industry, if people typically spend X, do we want to be like everybody else? Because I always think I got my mom in my ear who always says, well, if all your friends jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge, would you? And I've always got that in my ear, like, well, if everybody else is doing this, and maybe it's because I'm a natural contrarian, what is the thing that we're missing out on? Because we're kind of following the herd. And to your point, Gene, I agree. One, I couldn't emphasize that enough. Your idea of find an industry consultant who specializes in just that thing, who's lean, who's got the years and got the reps that can give you, hey man, I've been in this trench and I'm going to tell you, this is what you're going to see.
But at the same time, so I'm being the devil's advocate, but of course I'm being sarcastic. No one gets fired from the executive management for bringing a huge, big five, large XYZ consultancy, because it's a brand name, and so essentially they are not really hiring an expert, because most likely it would be a very junior consultant and a recent graduate from a very expensive college in a very expensive Valentino or Armani suit.
Yep. No. What is it, Gene? No one ever got fired for buying IBM. Was that the old saying, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, well, but that applies to, again, in my book of record, it doesn't apply to a single company or a single large consultancy, if you may want to call it. It applies to the whole array of companies that are in business of, making money. It's obnoxious. It's just grotesque to charge a client $9,000-$10,000 a day for delivering their best practices, because they're in the deck with the logo of that XYZ company.
Your Big Four.
Man, it's just, you better give this money to people that actually need it.
We've already touched on practical next steps. So fire the big name or don't hire the big name, right? And chart your own path. We've banged on generalities about HR compensation, incentivization. We've talked about budgeting at a very high level. Can we break it down into smaller pieces, or is it too context dependent to say, okay, after you've fired these people and let them go and throw away their 600-page PowerPoint, what do you look at next?
So if I may just say something, when you say fine, it's not because we're mad at them. Well, they should be, actually. I'm not. I'm just surprised. But why not own your own mistakes to begin with? If you feel that they are solving your problem, wrong, they're not. They're most likely selling you hot air in the desert. So if you are continue making mistakes that are your own, at least you know what you're up against your own problems. You have to fix them. But when you're paying for someone else's mistakes, and quite frankly, when they see that things are going south, they will, or you will disengage them. They're going to leave you right they will leave you right where they found you, minus $65 million. So you might as well skip that part. You might skip the 65, 75 million bucks wasted and start with the problems of your own. To your point where you get started. And again, this is totally not framework or specific methodology or system specific, very agnostic, but I am a big fan of experimental approaches that are deep and narrow as opposed to broad and shallow. I'm a big fan of going and improving organizations surgically, systemically, deeply by really, carving out those parts of the org that are best suitable for a transformation. For example, in my line of work, it would be typically, a product-centric organizational structure. So you have to properly define a product. Hint, hint. Speaking of business agility and all that other saga we hear about, business agility, it's not for IT. It's not for not IT. Business agility is part of organizational agility. Let's define your organization, and business agility is a part of it alongside with other towers and compartments. But I would start with, understanding what our system optimizing goals are and where we can start small and safely. And of course, a huge aspect of this is educating executive managers, leaders. Like you said, Jay, when managers stop becoming managers, they become true leaders. I would start there, and I wouldn't look for those that are comfortable and complacent with their own, in their own little safety zone. I would actually look for those senior executives that are somewhat uncomfortable with the situation they're in, better yet, with the situation they have inherited from their predecessor who grabbed a huge bonus and left. So those are best candidates because you can actually apply shock therapy on them, right? To them, say, none of that has worked. Do you want to step on the same brake again, or do you want to do something different?
But part of the problem is the person who left with a big bucket of cash.
Yes.
So depending on what you mean by did it work or did it not work?
For that person, it worked. For that person, it worked well.
But it left a freaking mess.
Right, it worked because they got their parachute. For me, I'm a big believer in. So my favorite question is, how's that working out for us? And you can use this in a lot of different places. You can actually use this in a lot of places in life. Wouldn't necessarily use it with my wife. Not really a good recipe for success, but how's that working out for us? I am intimately fascinated by how IT finance works, right? I really am fascinated by that. And I think one of the things I'm talking about in my current life is if we are not ready to rip off the Band-Aid and completely reinvent what we're going to do. And Gene, I know you're going to poke at it in later episodes when you get into like true business agility, org design, whatever. Okay, so we're still funding projects. Okay. How do we make that project funding as small as it can be to accelerate feedback? For example, instead of signing up for a 3-year monstrous initiative with big dollar amounts attached to it, right? Big, giant chunks of undefined scope. Can we whittle that down to something we can do in 9 months with a clear understanding about what success looks like and how we'll know if we're successful or not? And even better, how will we know we're going to be successful halfway through? Everybody talks about they're a pragmatic coach. We have to meet people where they're at. We hear that. I mean, pull the string out an Agile coach's back and you get like 6 or 7 buzzwords. But I truly believe like, okay, we can still fund the waterfall. How do we do small waterfalls? How do we do small waterfalls that are only value driven? So that small project is truly customer value we can get feedback on. I think I mean, when I talk about meeting people where they're at, that's how, if you're asking me anywhere I would start out the gate. It's part of the conversation I'm having now. I truly believe long term, there's an episode I did with Graham Scott, Practice Makes Profit, where he talks about theory of constraints and how to do budgeting and where to spend your money, how to open up throughput, right? Throughput accounting. I think that's the long-term solution, but that you need to get someone's mind open. I know Gene, I saw some of Gene's prep work. He talked about mindset and stuff. You can't just tell somebody you gotta change your mind.
Yeah.
You have to plant seeds, and to your point, Gene, build some successes where you say, hey, I got this goofy idea called throughput accounting, Mr. IT finance guy, Mrs. IT finance executive. And you may not believe me, but can you give me 30 minutes so we can just chat through this? And I'm hopefully going to get to that point where I can try it in my current life. But I think that's creating that understanding of, oh, what we do is we do decision making based upon cost accounting, which is wrong. We greenlight the wrong things, and then we slow our org down. That's my 2 cents.
I would subscribe. I don't have anything to almost nothing to add other than I think I just want to go back for a second. If we missed one of the questions, Andy, you posed something about where to start, and I think we answered that. Small is don't try to do big bangs and try to carve out the organizational structure that's best suitable for this. Oh, I think there was a question, the HR related. Why? Just want to add this little thing. Why is it such a challenge to change some of these legacy traditional ways of thinking and working? Something to keep in mind, and hopefully whoever listens to us will do a self-reflection. There's a lot of personal agenda and a lot of personal ambition and status quo that gets tripped by what we have discussed today. If you think about it, well, first of all, from the HR norms and policies perspective, imagine how many career seekers, career hoppers, and people that really want to climb up the ladder would be challenging us, the challengers, by saying, oh, no, everything you're saying does not make sense because being an individual performer and a hero in my current environment is the only way to get advanced. So that's a systemic problem. Why is there such a condition that you have to cut everyone else's throat to get advanced? But also, the more we challenge and suggest to simplify these practices and processes, we are also challenging those who are responsible for promoting them. So what does the complexity manager do? He or she manages complexity. If we remove complexity, we challenge the role. If we remove dependencies, we challenge the role of a dependency manager. So it's almost like a big elephant. The bigger it grows, the more it wants to eat. So the more we have those managers and managers of managers that manage challenges and obstacles, the more problems we need to have in a system to justify their existence. So it's a vicious cycle.
You just poked at something that it's not going to be part of this series, but I'd love to have a conversation later. The idea of I need to stick around and I need to get promoted. And as the agency that comes with us as employees, I called it the gambler, right? Kenny Rogers, know when to hold them and know when to fold them, right? Like that. There is something to unpack there with advice that we could give people, or just general heuristics around. Sometimes people stick around too long. This could be relationships. This could be jobs. This could be keeping your car running when you got 290,000 miles on it, right? Getting people to understand that it's not quitting, right? It's not quitting. Sometimes it is the least painful option to continue forward progress. I would love to, maybe we'll set up a future episode to talk about that, because that's like life advice stuff.
I think it's relevant to this conversation. Right. So, Gene, you said, part of the issue is the scale and the waste that comes inherent in that. So let's make it a smaller scale. Look for people who are uncomfortable and give them a different way of dealing with it. But we still have these incentive systems. I wish I could remember who told me this, but it's one of my favorites. And something you said, Gene, stimulated the memories. If you continue to reward firefighting, you will continue to breed arsonists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
We need heroes. So let's get heroes up here. It's gotten worse and worse, I think, over years, not better and better, in spite of our good intentions.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth a deeper dive, It's it would be great to have a talk about this.
Well, maybe this is a good place to put a pin in it. It's been about, who knows,
Yeah.
40 minutes runtime. Gene, is there anything else you want to add, knowing that we've got a couple shows but coming up? But
Uh,
what do you got?
I mean, in the context of our discussion, I think what we are touching upon is uncomfortable and maybe even inflaming for certain individuals and certain organizational structures, as well as, certain entire organizations that are certainly not there yet. I think it was to Jay's point, these things will become no longer an option and luxury. These things will eventually become a necessity and a mandate when things change, like with
Mm-hmm.
AI coming to the door,
Hmm.
competition, the world changing. It's almost like I'm making this analogy with with a therapist versus a surgeon. Who would you rather hear from that you need to change your diet and habits? From a physical therapist whom you met 15 years ago, or from a heart surgeon whom you met a
Right.
week ago?
Right.
It's an option and a nice thing to do, and I highly advise you to do it, versus
It's time.
we have to do it for us.
Yeah, yeah, Gene, I'm glad you said that because you bring up the point about, there's a lot of noise in the agile world about what's going on right now. And I just finished reading Carlotta Perez, Technological Revolutions of Financial Capital. And she talks about how fads don't die per se, they just become common sense. So to your point, Gene, product centricity, organizing around customer value, like these are things that it's not a fad anymore. It just is common sense. To your point, this is how you need to act going forward if you wish to be successful and you wish to survive.
Yeah.
Well, stay tuned.
Yeah, I subscribe to that. I thank you for that. Yeah, Jay, I agree.
Cool. Well, thank you, Gene. It's been a pleasure. What are the best ways for our listeners who have stuck out this long to get in touch with you?
I'm not hiding, so I'm on LinkedIn, and also they just can Google me, and if they Google me, that will most likely end up with my LinkedIn profile or my large scale Scrum certified coach and trainer profile, or my website where they can find a bunch of illegal information. Illegal as in what we have discussed today. And if they want to poke me, drop me a note, or one way or the other.
You also have a meetup. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah. So that's interesting. So large scale Scrum has been around for more than 20 years, but my very large global meetup, which was found in 2015, is pushing 6,700 people now.
Nice.
Close to it, and it's about large-scale, multi-site product development, business agility, customer centricity, and all of the aforementioned things that we discussed today. Very much of interest to people, and we bring in speakers and presenters, and we talk about this stuff explicitly, so people can look it up.
Yeah, we'll put links in the show notes to all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. So people are welcome to join. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again to both of you, Jay and Gene. Thanks to the listening audience. If you enjoyed this show, give us a review, a rating. Believe it or not, it really makes a difference. Helps other people find us. If you'd like to join this discussion and share your horror stories about perverse incentives, you can join our Discord server. See the show notes for a link there. And if you want to know about how HR and financial constraints impact product development, stick around for our next show in the series.
Yeah, we're going to do another 2 episodes, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll unpack something interesting.
Till then, this is the Agile Uprising podcast, signing out.